Hi, another game from round two of the FIDE Grand Prix tournament 2017. This game comes from GM Mameyarov with the white pieces, tactical, enterprising GM versus Evgeny Tomashevsky with the black pieces. This game opened up as the Queen's Indian defense. And I had to do a little homework here because I haven't looked at this opening in a long time. It's an interesting game. So d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and this right here, uh, still leaves many flexible options, and that's why I like this move order a lot with e6. If white plays knight c3, we have bishop b4 as a possibility going into a Nimzo Indian. c5, offering white a Benoni. And we have knight f3 that was actually played in the game, and now there's still some options. b6 would turn the game into a Queen's Indian defense. d5, we can go into Queen's Gambit decline, and we could play bishop b4 check, entering into Bogo Indian territory. So there's a lot of flexibility when knight f6 and e6 is played. Our game went into a Queen's Indian. Tomashevsky played b6, and now we have a3, which is not as popular as the other lines, but a3 is there's tons of theory here on this line, and we're not going to get into that because I mean you're talking about a heavily analyzed opening. This Queen's Indian with a3 is it. Um, let's suffice it to mention some of the basic ideas in this system. One of one of the most basic ideas is to stop this check from bishop b4 from happening. In other words, not even the check, but the bishop coming to b4. Period. So in many lines after say knight c3 and bishop b4, for instance, and e3. Black always has this annoying option in the Queen's Indian and Nimzo Indian defenses to play the move bishop b4, indirectly influencing the fight for the e4 square. Well, a long time ago, Grandmaster Petrosian decided that he would have none of it and just said, well, why can I not just spend the tempo, play a3, and rule out the possibility of bishop b4. Okay, so it seems like a waste of time on first sight, but after thousands and thousands of games at high level in tournament practice, uh, Black still hasn't found an absolutely clear way to equalize. And many strong players have played this from the white side, so uh, there's something in chess theory that's still not known because this move just, again, you would think it was a waste of time, but players like Karpov, Kramnik, Dreyev, Yusupov, Kasparov have played this from the white side. So it is definitely a viable option. Just know that there is tons of theory attached to this opening. Bishop b7 was played. Now, again, like I said, there's tons of theory. c5 is an option where play often takes on Benoni type formations. What else? Bishop a6, attacking this pawn. Right, you see that in some Queen Indians lines also. That's an option. Um, but Bishop b7 was played in our game here. Knight c3, and now d5. Now, a long time ago, players tried bishop e7, and that used to be met by d5, which is pretty strong. There's some a lot of games in that. But this move, bishop e7, is not really recommended due to that powerful response. So Tomashevsky played d5, queen c2. This is all theory, by the way, the main line. And the thing about queen c2 is this move kind of aims at playing e4. It's a flexible move. It aims at playing e4, but without playing the move e3 first. It's kind of one of those wait and see, one of the high level grandmaster moves. And that's basically the idea is he keeps the option open of playing e4, but doesn't waste the tempo by playing e2, e3 first. So he kind of just waits. All right. And black's two responses usually are d takes c4, okay, and the move bishop e7. Now here we see knight b d7, right, which is excuse me, which is another line. Like I told you, this line has been heavily analyzed. Okay, Mameyarov plays c takes d5. This is all again theory, and e takes d5. Knight takes d5 is another option, and it's a very logical option also. And this was played way back in 1992 by none other than Anatoly Karpov versus Boris Gelfand. After knight d5, Karpov attempted to keep the position open for the bishop, right, which is very reasonable, and he played bishop takes d5. Right? Now, the problem with that is now he gets hit in the mouth with e4. Bishop b7. Boris Gelfand played bishop b5, and notice the weakness on the light squares. c6. Okay, there's really no choice here. Bishop takes c6, rook c8, d5, queen c7 from Karpov, and knight d4. Game continued. Bishop takes c6, knight c6, knight b8, bishop e3, knight c6, rook c1, very strong move. Now Karpov played bishop c5. Okay. And after d takes c6, queen takes. Well, with this setup right here, this gave Gelfand the time where he could just comfortably castle due to the pin and restriction on the c file. And Gelfand went on to win this game in 37 moves. What's funny about this game actually between Gelfand and Karpov actually lost on time, but he was his position was busted anyway. So he kind of let the clock run out. So in this game, back to the game, Tomashevsky played e takes d5. So in other words, it's basically instead of trading the pieces off with knight takes d5 first, he just go ahead. He decides to acquiesce to this pawn structure. So e takes d5. Right, so he's still fighting for this square, and we could take time to assess this position right here, and we see that the queen is well placed on the c file, to attack the c pawn, and moves like bishop f4 come to mind. Again, attacking the c pawn and rook a to c1. Those type of moves definitely come to mind here. So black has to be careful. Black wants to get in, get rid of this weakness, of course. And if you go into this line, be prepared to take on hanging pawns, because eventually you're going to be forced to play c5, and you'll wind up with pawns at c5 and d4. So if you're d5 and c5. So if you're comfortable with hanging pawns, by all means, you go into this type of position. So there it is. Real simple idea. A6, preventing moves like knight b5. G3, indicating the fianchetto at the bishop G2. Bishop E7. Bishop G2 castles. And I would say here, white has a slight advantage here. Because black really has no pressure or anything on white position. But white has a nice open C file and a clear target to attack. Okay, so black is basically relegated to defense. And here the time showed that Mameyarov is at 1:44 on the clock. Tomashevsky at 1:18, so he's feeling the heat. Rook to E8. Rook C1. Again, these are all easy moves to make. Now, and why do I say easy moves to make? Because they're pretty much no-brainers. So I just told you Mameyarov was at 1:44 on the clock. It took him 1 minute to make this move. Okay, he actually gained time here with the increment. He made that move so quick. Meanwhile, Tomashevsky took him, he was at 48 minutes. Now he's at 34 minutes. So it took him a long time just to play C5 because, like I said, C5 has to be played eventually because there's too much pressure on the C file. So you got to be willing to go into those hanging pawns. And this is what happens. Now, I'm not saying hanging pawns are bad. They're neither. They're neither good nor bad. It depends on the situation. Okay, and it depends on what you're able to do. All right, hanging pawns are cousins, close cousins to isolated pawns. And the rules with isolated pawns apply to the hanging pawns. Hanging pawns meaning these two pawns are all alone, right? They're like two brothers. You know, they're all alone, right? They have no pawns to support them. Therefore, they must be defended with pieces, just like the isolated pawns. And usually hanging pawns wind up as an isolated pawn at one point or another. One gets traded off and becomes an isolated pawn. But the rules are pretty much the same. If you have the isolated pawns, you want to keep the pieces on the board. You want to control the files next to the isolated pawns. So in this case, get rid of the graphic. So in this case for black, you want to have control over the E file and the B file. All right. You want to use the positives of these pawns. You see how much space they control in the center. So you want to try to keep them united if you can. Because this is when they're most powerful, when they're side by side. Not when one is in the front like this. Okay, because then you create holes. But when they're united like that, they're very powerful. Just like with isolated pawns, you want to utilize the outpost. So here, for instance, E4, D4 for black. Okay, even C4. You want to use the open lanes for you to attack with your pieces. So understanding this, you know, you should be able to develop the plan for black. And that's, you have to play attacking chess here. All right, the end game is not going to be necessarily favorable for you. You're going to have to become, if you're not, you're going to have to become an attacking player and use the dynamic potential in the position rather than, you know, trying to outplay opponent positionally and statically. White, on the other hand, he has the opposite, you know, mentality, right? He's going to try to attack the pawns, right? Because the pawns have to be defended by pieces. And what's the formula for attacking isolated pawns? First, you attack the pawn. The pieces come to defend the pawn. Number two, you attack the pieces that come to the defense of the pawn. You eliminate the defenders of the pawn. Once you eliminate those defenders, right, thus trading off pieces, right, you limit the opponent's attacking possibilities, right? That's what he wants to do. And then you increase the pressure on the said isolated or hanging pawns. Why? Because the less pieces available right? That's the less pieces available that can defend them, because remember, the pawn has to be defended by pieces, right? So it all just comes together, the plan that you should be doing. In this case, Mameyarov wants to put his rooks on c1, d1, okay? He wants to attack these pawns, trade off where he can, limit the opponent's activity, and go on into an endgame. That's the general plan. Of course, everything is based on tactics, because tactics is king in the chess position. But that would be like your general plan. Attacking the isolated pawns, then attacking the defenders, removing the defenders, etc. Right? And we can see why through the years, if you notice, against most dynamic positions like this, like if you look at the Terrace defense, you look at your Queen's Gambit decline, Tartakower variations, etc., etc. Anytime there's real dynamic attacking chances, you see, even against the Dutch defense, right? Openings that there's real dynamic attacking chances, you'll see white adopt a fiend kettle, because not only is this bishop very strong in the diagonal, but this is a naturally strong defensive formation, anticipating the attack. All right, that's enough explaining there. Let's keep going. 95 again. So now we see pressure against the pawn, right? Right? Two attackers, two defenders, and inviting the trade-off pieces. So you see how everything goes together. Bishop e7. So now Tomashevsky is just threatening to win a piece right on e5. Right? By knight takes. Mameyarov continues with his plan, because he wants to trade off. He wants to trade off and win these pawns. So not only does he attack the bishop on b7, he adds a third unit to the attack of this pawn on d5. Queen b6. All right. Now, again, this move defends, right? It does the job, but whose plan, right now, based on what I've told you, whose plan is supported here? White's plan or black's plan? Okay? You should be able to answer that easily. Queen takes b6. Knight takes b6. Rook fd1. Again, whose plan is winning out, right? Is it white's plan or black's plan? So we see you got 1, 2, 3 defenders, and you got 1, 2, 3 attackers here. Okay, rook a7, protecting the bishop here. Looks like a mysterious rook move, but it's protecting the bishop. Okay, for any kind of tactical maneuvers, and in some cases, eventually it'll move the rook over. This would fall under the category of a mysterious rook move. Nemzovich would say. E3. Okay, fixing the pawns so they can't advance. Because remember, the formula is restrict, block, and destroy. A3, H6, and G5 is the threat right there. Okay, that's easily dealt with. See, bishop drops back, and now the rook is going to be able to transverse on the 7th ring. See, just provoking, attacking the pawns. Remember, you attack the pieces, that's defending the pawns, and you you attack the pawns. It's about pressure. You just keep putting pressure. And remember, I told you black's plan is to play dynamically. As long as you're putting pressure on the pawns, and he has to protect the pawns, he can't play dynamically because he's stuck protecting. Okay, and that's what Mameyarov is doing. He's keeping Tomashevsky's hands full. Rook d7. Oh, see, attacking one of the defenders. He has to go back. B4. This is a very strong move. Why? Because remember I just told you a few minutes ago that these pawns, the C and D pawns, are strongest when united. Now one is going to be forced either to capture here or go forward. That creates the holes in the position. He opts to take. And now the hanging pawn formation is now the isolated pawn formation. And there's many resources online if you want to really understand hanging pawns and isolated pawns and things of that nature. But a book that I read a long time ago that's in my library, and I think it's one of the greatest chess books ever written. There's two parts to it. It's called The Middle Game. The Middle Game by Max Erva. Right? That the way the explanation, it's not just a bunch of games with variations. I hate books like that with no explanation. Just games, little brief stuff like, oh, he did that to capture this, or in no real, you don't get the understanding. Right? That book is real good for explaining things like that. Generally, I try to stay away from isolated and hanging pawn positions. I really don't like them that much. Not that they're bad, but that's just my preference. There's something else you got to deal with. Okay, 8, so A takes B4, so now we have the isolated pawn position. And again, same formula to play with it and against it. Okay? Black wants to push this pawn and liberate it. Right? Either trade it off, bust over, use it to break down white's position. When you have the isolated pawn on the white side, you hear many times that white wants to play the move D5 and use it as a battering ram. It's the same thing if you have colors reversed. That's one of the objectives of black. Use it as a battering ram. Another objective, utilize the outpost. Remember I mentioned these earlier. The outpost. Okay? But the big downside is that this pawn has to be protected. Let's keep going. So there it is. D4. Tomashevsky gets his break in. But at what cost? So he takes D5. So he sacrifices the pawn. Right? He makes a positional sacrifice. Because he says, you know what? Why am I going to just keep defending this pawn? Here, take the pawn. Right? So he's hoping for some type of positional compensation. And with that move, you see, now he has 3 pieces attacking this B pawn. Bishop E5. Now, I thought this was an interesting move here. Right? Holding on to the pawn a little longer with the idea of, say, knight here. It can create some minor harassment here. For instance, B7. A lot of play there for white. So he plays bishop E5. And knight takes C3. Now, why not knight takes B4 here? The idea is Mameyarov is saying, hey, let's work out a deal. I'll give you your pawn back, but you let me destroy your pawns on the king side. The idea is simply just to play there. Bishop takes F6. G takes F6, and now you got this. These pawns are terrible. Knight F4. And black is still not out of the wilderness. And that was Mameyarov idea there. Same deal with if bishop takes. But it would be worse after knight takes D5, and then this is kind of ugly right here. And then you have moves like that. And we have black is still under pressure. The rook e1 taking over the file, and we see that white has the isolated pawn in the center of the board, but his pieces are all better. This is not too bad for black. He's still at a disadvantage here. Tomashevsky opted for knight takes c3, rook takes c3, and knight d5. Mameyarov played rook c4, and now Tomashevsky decided to grab his merchandise. Now, if you've been following my last couple of videos where I've been annotating the games of this tournament, I've been noting that one of the trademarks of the top GMs is that they're real patient. They put the position first before ahead of material. In this case, I was thinking that instead of knight takes b4 right away, of course you want to capture material, but instead of that right away, maybe knock this guy out of e5. I was thinking a move like f6, perhaps. Okay, it's an interesting move to me. The idea is to take here, and if, like I said, it's a big if. If knight takes f4, then just rook. Now rook takes b4. Now you're in the clear. Of course, he can take with the g pawn, but then you kind of reverse the roles where you made this positional pawn sacrifice, but you've busted up the white pawn structure, give him a lot of weaknesses to worry about. But he took the pawn right away on b4, knight c5, bishop takes c5, d takes c5, and now he's ready to push this guy up. So that's why I'm saying this seems like a plus for white here. He jumps into a blockade situation. Bishop c3, rook b e7, rook d6, and of course, what do you do against a blockade? Well, you got to try to remove it. And that's what's going on here. Rook c7. And this is just deadly. This is that principle of two weaknesses. Okay, so he has a passed pawn, which causes black to divert his resources to try to stop it, of course. Right? So while black is distracted trying to stop the passed pawn, what happens? There's a water leak somewhere else, and that's what happens. It's kind of like you stop one part of the leak, and now this another part of the pipe is leaking, and that's what happens with this move, rook g4. Now g7 is under pressure. So f5. So he tries to be defensive and offensive at the same time. The rook now, due to this pawn moving from f5, the rook protects d7, and he makes an attacking move at the same time. Now he goes up to g6, putting pressure on the 6th rank. Another move that I was looking at during the game was just attacking this pawn, rook a4. And I didn't see much that black could do about that at the time. He would have to probably give up this blockade, because I don't think this move works because of this pawn. You see what I'm saying? So if he tries to defend that, a6, then you just take on f5. So the only move I see is knight d7, which protects that, but then this pawn drops, and then you play this knight d6. Excuse me, rook d takes a6, and now you have a double attack here. That's what I was looking at during the game. Rook g6 was played. Knight e5. Attacking the rook. Bishop takes e5. And now Mameyarov is just going to simplification mode, right? He realizes he has a large advantage and he's just simplifying. This bishop is buried, right? The only way out is to basically sacrifice itself. And now you see Mameyarov idea with putting both rooks on the 6th rank. Kills his bishop. Deadly move. Totally dominating position. And here's the last ditch effort to try to win this pawn on c6. That hurts. Bishop g2, because that means that it's basically all over. And then the next move that's coming is rook to d7 with this double attack on the g7. That was enough to cause Tomashevsky to resign. Okay, play can continue. For example, rook c8, king h2, just so you can understand the ending. Rook c2, and then your rook d7 will come. So now you have this double attack here. Rook takes d7 will be forced, and then you have c takes, and you see there's an attack on the bishop, and the pawn is going to queen on d8. So there's really no stopping it. The only way you could play is play rook d2, because you got to stop the most valuable threat. And bishop takes a8, so you would just beat down the piece. And this is why Tomashevsky resigned after 37, bishop g2. And by the way, Mameyarov had 21 minutes on the clock. Tomashevsky had 5 minutes and 40 seconds. So I hope you enjoyed that game. Please like and subscribe. Comment below, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. But like I said, this is a very complicated line. For black, that is, and it's a good line to learn if you're white looking for a repertoire against d4. a3 is it's like a sideline, but it's very deadly sideline, and but it does require a lot of preparation. So I'll see you guys on the next video.